Welcome to my State of the Union address, in which I discuss with you how my life is going, because it's definitely going. Also, excuse if there's background noise. There's a ton of construction happening on my street, and there's just really nothing I can do about that. So, where have I been? Where have I been hiding? Where have I been going? Who have I been seeing? Let's talk about it all. First of all, I moved back to Europe. I did do that. I moved back to Europe possibly permanently, which I think is somewhat my decision and also somewhat not my decision. Honestly, at the end of the day, I don't really know what's going to happen with the United States. I have moved back initially for school. So I'm getting my master's in international education, and it's possible that after leaving for university, I may not be allowed back in, right? So, as all of you know, I'm transgender. Shocking. He's trans? I know. I'm transgender and my passport has an X on it. The reason that my passport has an X on it is not actually because I'm trans. I chose to put the X. I could have put male if I wanted to. I chose to put X because two reasons. One, I wanted to honor my identity as a transgender person, and the other was I really felt that it was important to give myself space to explore my gender in the future. So I didn't want to have to put male or female because I felt like that was taking away the opportunity for me to kind of explore. You know what I mean? So now I have an X on my passport. The reason that becomes kind of an issue is that technically X is no longer recognized. Well, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I think as of yesterday, it's now recognized in some places, but let's see how long that lasts, I suppose. Um, if the X is not actually recognized, then that would make my passport a federally fraudulent document. So, for all of those reasons and many more, I'm very hesitant about going back to the United States, and I also don't know if I would even be allowed to be there if I went back, which obviously is unbelievably annoying because I have done absolutely nothing wrong. But as I'm sure you've seen online, and if you want to do your own research as well, you can find proof of this. Transgender people are being labeled as this nihilistic extremist group that, all of us are insane and we all hate the United States. We want the downfall of society. And it's it's such an interesting experience to watch the downfall of my own country from the outside because it's like every day I wake up and I go out and there's queer flags, there's trans flags, and I live in a very queer district, and so there's a lot of queer stuff going around. And then I open the news to look at my home, Los Angeles, and I see that Trump has labeled trans people a violent extremist group. He's shut down integral LGBT mental health services, such as the suicide hotline for LGBT people. He also wants to violate HIPAA laws for transgender medical records. I mean, I have notes about this on my iPad, you guys, and like, it's crazy. Like, he, Donald Trump has threatened to withhold funding from federally funded medical institutions if they do not agree to turn over all medical records to the federal government of anyone that had been diagnosed with or treated for gender dysphoria, um, which is obviously a violation of HIPAA. You can't request other people's medical records. You can't get people's personal information sent to you. And it's absolutely wild to watch this happen from the outside because I know that while I live in California and so I am somewhat protected by all of this, it's definitely going to affect my medical records because I am very, very happily out and trans. And also, even if it doesn't affect my medical records, I always think it's so weird. And I've said this so many times too on my podcast, and or on my Instagram page. And I know I'm jumping in, by the way, and I apologize for that, but I have so many thoughts. And a thing that I was thinking is that something that I get told a lot is, well, you're not a woman anymore, so why do you care so much about women's rights? And I always think that's such an insane question to get. Like, that to me is such a crazy thing to say, that I should only care about people's rights or people's freedoms if I'm part of that community. Like, suddenly not identifying as a woman makes me hate all women. Well, what are you talking about? What are we talking about? Like, it's it's so stupid it actually makes my blood boil a little bit because what do you mean? What do you mean? What are we talking about? And I think that when we talk about the trans thing, people are saying, "Oh, well, you got out of the states." "Oh, well, you're from California. You're whatever. You don't have to worry about this." I may not have to worry about it for myself, but that doesn't mean I'm not worried about it for everybody else. Especially because I very heavily identify with the idea of community within trans and queer spaces. And so if one of us is getting fucked over by the United States government, we're all getting fucked over by the United States government. You know what I mean? I don't think that it's like I don't I don't think that they are mutually exclusive. Let's put it that way. I do think, and I've talked to my therapist about this before because he is also trans, but he is not white. I do think as a white person, my experience being trans is somewhat softened, right? It's a little bit cushioned. I am white. I have certain socioeconomic privileges. Um, I'm also not currently in the United States. So those are all things that make it easier, quote unquote, easier for me to exist within this world that seems to hate trans people so much because in my day to day life, I'm not experiencing that intensity of hatred. But it does hurt to watch it. It does hurt to know that it's happening. And also, I mean, when the Nazis first took power in Germany, they initially only said they were going to target Jews, and then they eventually just started rounding bitches up. Just as much as they could, as many as they could, as often as they could. And so I also don't believe that I am safe simply because of my location or my race or my money or whatever. I truly think that all of us are in danger if one of us is in danger, right? The idea that like not none of us are free until all of us are free. That kind of thing. Um I am back in Spain, at least for the time being. I feel safer and happier for sure outside of the US. I definitely feel like I'm breathing a little easier. My sleep is a little better. I'm back to kind of dressing up when I go out, which if you follow my Instagram, you'll or TikTok, you'll definitely see those little fits. That's the kind of stuff that like I wouldn't have worn in LA and I haven't been wearing in LA just because Los Angeles, while it's obviously a very progressive city and it's somewhere that I hold very dear to my heart, it's my home, my first home. But just because we are a diverse city does not mean that we do not experience bigotry and discrimination. And I try to avoid that as much as possible, just because I don't really want to deal with it. I don't like talking to people dumber than me, and I think that if you're a bigot, you're probably stupid. Why would I discuss serious topics with someone that has the IQ of a dying trout in the Amazon rainforest? I'm supposed to pretend like we're equals? Really? So that's why I tend to not interact with bigots because I don't think they're smart enough to talk to me. I just don't like it's just a waste of time. Why would you explain quantum theory to a 2-year-old unless you just wanted to hear yourself speak? And I can hear myself speak whenever I want. Case in point, I'm talking to a camera right now in dead silence in my own room, in my own apartment by myself. So I try to avoid bigots as much as I possibly can because they're just not useful to my existence. But I did find that in the States, even when I was trying to avoid them by, dressing a certain way or talking a certain way, kind of reducing my mannerisms a little bit, I was still getting called faggot on the street when I was with my grandma. I got my car windows smashed because of a queer sticker. Um, I've been, denied being able to go places because of the fact that I'm trans. So being back in Spain has definitely made me feel safer. I don't feel like everyone is as actively out to get me. Um, and also because there are so many more clearly queer spaces that you can walk by, right? Because LA, you're always in the car. So it's very like individual. Here you walk everywhere. So you get to kind of see all the queer spaces and like see all the queer people. And I think that that has brought me a lot of comfort specifically. Because the one thing about LA is I lived in the beach cities, which is like at the opposite end of Venice Beach, Santa Monica kind of area, and it's closer to the Mexican border. And there were queer spaces there to be sure, but again, with the being in the car, like you don't see the queerness until you arrive there. Versus here, it's like I'm walking around and I see like trans flags and I see queer flags and I see queer bars that are going to open up later in the day and stuff like that. It's more of like an active reminder, which I really really appreciate. I've also been so happy with all the pro-Palestine stuff going on in this city. Um, I'm thinking of doing a breakdown video on kind of like what's going on in Palestine. So let me know if that's something you would like to see. I feel like there's a lot of people kind of talking and chatting about what's going on there politically, and I I feel like a lot of it is either very, very complicated information or just people like spouting back what they read in headlines. So I thought it could be good for us to kind of have like a sit down conversation where we just kind of talk about what's going on. Like what is actually happening in Palestine? What is Israel actually doing? What are people actually being um, accused of, right? So I've been very happy with all the pro-Palestine stuff going on. I actually went to the Palestine March, if you saw that, in Barcelona a couple weekends ago. There was, I think, over 300,000 people there, which is so insane. And I went with my friend, and it was so much fun. I got a new bag that has like Palestine on it, and then I got a new shirt as well. So I'm really adding to my Palestine collection, which is fun. They had this little they had this little booth thing, like one of those tents, kind of, and it was just this little family of these Palestinian women. Ooh, sorry, these Palestinian women, and they were selling these, and I was like, "Fuck yeah, I want that shit!" So I got it, and it was probably the first time I felt comfortable at a demonstration in a really long time. For those of you who don't know, LAPD, Los Angeles Police Department, is rated as one of the most corrupt police departments in the United States every single year, pretty reliably, actually, which is impressive. But the other thing is, it's difficult to find the courage to go into public spaces when the people that are supposed to protect you in those public spaces are the people that are causing the violence, right? And I was very happy that there were police officers at this protest for Palestine. There were officers for sure, but they were mostly there just to kind of make sure that the roads were clear, that no one was, trying to drive in through the barricades. There were also no guns in the hands of the public, which, as an American, if you're from the United States, you know how rare it is to go to a protest or demonstration and know that there are no guns. Like, no human person of the public has access to a gun. That's never how it goes, especially in LA. I go to every protest assuming that at least 5% of the people there are armed and probably loaded. So it was really nice to be able to go and not be scared that I was going to be shot. So that's the United States. Recently, especially with the pro Palestine stuff, I've been really trying to figure out kind of how I fit into activism. Obviously, I am a white, blonde, middle class little bitch. Yeah. Not offensively. You know what I mean? No offense to myself. I don't. Anyways, as a white person a white person that is interested in race activism, right? So, for those of you who don't know, I speak Spanish. The whole reason I learned Spanish was because when I was 16, I decided that I was going to study abroad in a Spanish speaking country. My reasoning being I had always wanted to study abroad, I just didn't know what language. And I decided on Spanish because since I live in Los Angeles, immigrant rights, voting rights are very, 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 very important conversations, right? Very important conversations. And I wanted to help. I wanted people to know what their rights were. I wanted to help people um, immigrate, and I wanted to help people feel safe in my community. And the way that I did that was by talking to people. What I pretty quickly realized, though, is that a lot of people didn't speak English, or at least they didn't speak English well enough to explain their positions to me and their lives to me. And so I came up with, then I thought, well, I could always hire a translator, and then I could just have a translator whenever I was going out to do, work in the political sphere with people who didn't speak English. And then I thought, yeah, but a translator, it's always going to be biased, right? Like, even if the translator doesn't mean to, they're always going to be inputting their own opinions, their own findings, whatever, onto the translation that they give. And I didn't want a translated version of someone's story. I wanted someone's story. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to know what was going on. And the only way that I could think to do that was by learning Spanish. If the person that you're trying to speak with only speaks Spanish, why would you not just learn Spanish so you can speak with them? It seemed the most logical thing to do. I want to help immigrants who speak Spanish. They don't speak English. Therefore, I must speak Spanish so I can help. Because why would I make hundreds of thousands of people learn a second language when I could just learn a second language and now I can talk to the hundreds of thousands of people? So that's kind of what got me into like the idea of race activism, and then with everything going on with Palestine, Black Lives Matter, all of that kind of stuff, I pretty quickly realized like racial activism and racial equal rights is something I feel really passionate about. But as a white person, I'm trying to find a non like savior way to interact with racial activism. I think that we talk a lot about this idea of white saviorism, which is the idea that white people, most of the time, not even really meaning to do it this way, but sometimes yes, and very often has this consequence, whether or not their intentions were such. But basically, a white person, let's say, goes into an impoverished city in China and they build a well and they leave, right? So that white person might look at themselves and be like, well, I did a really good thing. I just helped these people build a well. Well, what they don't know is that the town didn't need a well because the well doesn't actually go to anything. Um, they built the well is dry. Now they have this well for nothing. A white person goes to a little village in India and they build a school. That's good. Now they have a school, but they don't have teachers. They don't have qualified professionals. They don't have any kind of infrastructure for a school. They have two kids in the whole village. So now they just have a school. You know what I mean? Like, it's the idea of going into a community and instead of giving them what they need, you give them what you think they need. That's white saviorism. So I'm trying to figure out ways in which I can get involved without becoming a white savior, especially because two of the fields I'm really interested in are working on the United States' implication in the Middle East and North Africa, um, as well as immigration policies in the United States for Latin American countries, specifically Mexico. I think the United States' impact on North Africa and the political area known as the Middle East is something that is so, so, so integral to understanding the history of the United States and understanding why we are so involved in the Palestinian conflict right now. But I also think, again, going into those kinds of spaces as a white person, just having to maintain my maintain my place, almost like understanding where I fit into the equation and not trying to push my voice over other people's or, you know, get myself ahead at the cost of others. So I'm trying to figure out ways to connect with local activists in Spain and in France and the United States to try and basically form connections in these worlds without necessarily like intruding or forcing myself on people. I don't want to go into a space and just start trying to make it my own, but I also know that I do tend to have a lot of opinions and a very big voice. So I'm trying to figure out kind of how do I leverage my personality to get me in the door without it becoming a de- deciding factor in how I interact with my new coworkers, right? I don't want my voice to be the only voice, and I also don't want other people to feel like I value my opinion more than I value theirs. So trying to figure that out, and especially like outside of the US, I don't have that many connections. I know more activists in the US, especially in LA, because I also have friends and family that are very involved in different areas of activism, so I really rely on them for recommendations. But here in France and Spain, I just like really don't have that many connections in those spheres. So I'm just trying to like work through that essentially. It is funny to me as I talk about trying to work in activism how many people have either come to me and they haven't I was expecting the like, well, how are you going to make a job out of that? And I haven't gotten any of those responses. Instead what I've gotten is, well, you know that at the beginning you're not going to be like at the forefront, right? Like you're not going to be the face of it. You're not going to be the person that's representing them everywhere. And I think that's such a funny, like, it's such an interesting reaction, I guess, because that was not even a part of what I was thinking. I mean, I figured at some point I would become like a representative of something, but I figured I'd be like 40 by that point. I'm only 25 now. I have barely any experience. I have a lot of lived experience, but I don't have lived experience in what it is like to be a political refugee or what it is like to be from the Middle East or North Africa or Palestine or Mexico or deal with race-based discrimination or you know um, exploitative visa practices. I've never had to deal with any of that. So I kind of assumed I wouldn't be at the forefront of the conversation because hello, like what are we talking about? So that's been kind of an interesting. I don't know. It's just like weird. It just never occurred to me. I guess like it never occurred to me that I would be at the forefront of anything, especially now. Again, I figured I'd get there eventually, but like, damn, girl, I'm 25. Shit, like I barely got anything under my belt. I barely have any idea what the fuck is going on, and so the idea of me representing any kind of NGO or nonprofit, even if it's like just me, is so wild. I think also the experience of moving abroad this time has felt really different because I think in the last times I've come mostly for school, right? Like it's been, okay, I'll be here for a semester and then I'll go home for Christmas and I'll come back for the spring. And I was always working towards being a professor. I knew that I was getting my master's and then my PhD and then I was going to live in Spain and blah blah blah. And this time felt really different because one, I can't really go back, right? We talked about that in the beginning. I'm not really able to go back to the United States as it stands. That's just not really an option for me right now. The other reason that it's different though is I feel like in the past I've always come out here with the understanding that my education would be kind of my lifeline. Like my education would be my way of stepping into my career, like stepping into the next era of my professional identity. And I really thought that being a professor was like my short term goal. Like I thought I was going to be a prof by the time I was like 28, 29. And moving back this time, I realized it's, I do think I'm going to be an educator, but I don't think it's going to happen now. I think that I need to reprioritize in my life the kind of impact that I want to have. And while I do think that impacting people through education and impacting students, they always say like that's our future leaders. I think that impacting our future leaders is a good idea. But I also think that right now we need less of me in education and maybe me more in activism spaces because I am pretty fucking riled up. And at this point, I think if a Trump supporting kid walked into my classroom, I would have to walk myself out to take a deep breath. Not because I won't teach them, but because I will need a deep breath every time they say something I don't agree with so that I, as a teacher, do not lose my cool. It also felt different this time because I had to pack up and bring all my shit with me. Usually I have like a suitcase and a carry-on and then I leave a bunch of my stuff, like all of my stuff in my bedroom at my parents' house, the storage facility that we have and all of that. Usually I'll leave stuff in there. But this time I packed literally everything I own. So I have 4 suitcases. That is all I own in the world. And it is now traveling with me everywhere for the foreseeable future. So that also feels pretty different. I think I have in our storage, I think I have like 2 squishmallows and like a carry-on worth of like artwork that I've collected over the years that I couldn't bring with me. And other than that, everything I own is in 4 suitcases. And that I think has been it wasn't a huge adjustment because I've been living out of suitcases for a few years now, but it it gave it more finality. I think it made it feel more final, me leaving, because everything I have is with me. There really is no reason to go back except to see my family and everything, and my friends and all of that. But in terms of like actual physical items that I have to go back and get and come back with, I don't have those anymore. And I think that that feels really different. It feels really different to know that there is not something waiting for me when I go back home. There's not a bedroom, there's not a wardrobe, there's not 16 boxes of stuff. It's literally just two squishmallows and some artwork. And they've turned my bedroom into my niece's bedroom, and we, ended the lease on my apartment, and I I crashed my car, which is this whole other thing, but I crashed my car, so I don't even have a car anymore. That shit's in the junkyard. Hello. You might notice that I got a haircut, and the room looks slightly different, and the lighting is weird, and the sound is off. Well, I recorded 45 minutes of this podcast, and then my microphone died for the last 15. So I lost all that footage, and now I'm back re-recording it. But basically, just to finish up the podcast episode with talking about the fact that, I really don't have anything physical tying me back to the United States anymore. I think ultimately that kind of changes my perspective in terms of my future, because it used to be more, oh God, not the voice crack. It used to be more that my future was focused on what I wanted to do and the kinds of things that I thought would make me feel supported or fulfilled in my life. And it was pretty individualistic in the sense that it was more focused on how can my life, I guess, benefit me. Now I think I'm looking more at it as like how can my life benefit other people? What can I do with my life and with my time that would actually help other people in a significant way? I don't think that either of them is better or worse. I just think that my priorities changed. I wanted to be an educator because I wanted to be of service, but I think that now how I want to be of service has changed. And I think that again, it's finding my place. It's finding out where I fit. It's finding out how I fit into this entire sphere that is the earth, especially now that it's being so globalized and internationalized, and we have access to information from all over the world. We have access to so many facts and non-facts. And so I think that, moving forward, part of the reason that I'm kind of dedicating myself again to the social media aspect of activism is that in this moment, I really do feel like my form of being of service is by putting my voice out there and helping other people feel more understood, less isolated, less ostracized. And yeah, that's kind of it. Next week, we'll have, since I hopefully will remember to charge everything, we will have an actual in depth kind of fun podcast episode. But I hope you enjoyed this first podcast episode. I personally loved it. I really like talking to you guys. I think that this kind of longer form content gives us like more of a chance to connect, kind of get into the nuance of conversation. I try to make it so that through my social media you can kind of get a feel of who I am, but I do think that with, 15-second reels and 10-second TikToks, it's pretty hard to get an idea of who a person is like truly. Um, I think podcast and YouTube and Substack and things are such a great way to get around that. So I'm going to link everything in the podcast description. If you'd like to follow me on any other social media platforms, I am around and avail. But I love you. I'm sending you so much success and light and hope during this very, very dark time internationally. Trust me, for all that I am upbeat and happy as a clam, I am also extremely terrified and pretty much constantly thinking doomed thoughts, if that makes sense. Like I pretty much consistently am having to remind myself to have hope, because at this point I feel like it is so difficult to have hope in this world. Seems like everything is just turning into a disaster. So, but I love you, and I'm sending you hope, and I'm sending you love, and I don't know. I wish there was more that I could do to help every single one of you feel better, but I hope for at least a second I helped you get out of your head and back into a little bit of sense of normalcy before you continue on with your day, week, hour, whatever you feel. But yeah, I love you. Hope you have a wonderful day, weekend, whatever. And I'll see you next week. Bye.